It's a good day to die. What do you think about when you hear that? I am Brandon, this is the Dirt Church Devotional. I'll tell you what I think. For some reason, I start thinking about Samson. Samson was one of the judges of Israel, and you can find his story starting in Judges chapter 13 in the Old Testament. See, Samson was this guy that God had anointed. I mean, he had called him out before his birth, and he was going to begin the deliverance of Israel. And this was a guy that was stronger than anybody had ever been, strongest man that ever lived. And yet the sad reality was, for the most of his life, he lived for himself. For the most of his life, he was chasing skirts and he was doing different things. He lived for himself. He kind of ignored the calling that God had placed on his life, or ignored the purpose. And it got to the place where they found out that through Delilah that the secret to his strength, so to speak, outside of it actually being God, the secret to his strength was his hair. He had long hair, and it was in 7 long braids. And they shaved his head. She had lulled him to sleep, and they shaved his head. And it says, and it's so sad, it says that the Spirit of God left him, and he didn't even know it. So the Spirit of God left him, and they shave his head, and Delilah calls out, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." And he thinks he's going to jump up and escape, and yet all of his strength has left. And then they take him and they poke his eyes out, they blind him, and they put him to work grinding meal. He went from defeating the enemy to feeding the enemy, and he's grinding meal, and they're using him as this puppet entertainer, this guy that had been the mightiest warrior that was destroying the enemy. But you know, there's a really neat part of the story. While he's grinding grain, while he has been humbled, he's been shaved, and he is shamed, he's grinding grain, and it says, and his hair began to grow. And there's no reason for that to be said, because hair grows naturally most of the time, but his hair was growing supernaturally. And you see, he had humbled himself, and he submitted himself back to God. And I love the fact that God gives us second chances and third chances and fourth chances and whatever. But anyway, they called him out. They were having a big celebration to their god Dagon, and they called Samson out to entertain them. And as he's being brought out, there is such a heart change. He asked the boy that's leading him out, he says, "Put my hands on the pillars that hold up the temple." And with one hand on one pillar and the other on another, he let out one more cry to God, and he says, "Let me die with the Philistines." In other words, it's a good day to die. And with a mighty heave-ho, he knocked down the temple, and the Bible says that he destroyed more of the enemy with his death than he ever did in his life. And this is what's got me thinking about. We live for a lot of different things, but can I tell you, if what you're living for isn't worth dying for, you should reevaluate, because it's probably not worth living for either. So my challenge to you, live for something to die for, because it's a good day to die. Chew on that. Like, share, subscribe. We'll talk to you next time.